Hey guys, welcome back. I'm here to talk about episode 5, and man, there's a lot to go over in this episode. We got tons of Easter eggs to go over. So, without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. And also, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to help me out. The episode is titled Maverick, which means a person who shows independence of thought and action, especially by refusing to adhere to policies of a group which he or she belongs. Which, let's be honest, reading this definition, you probably already pictured at least one or two characters from this series already. Also, interesting enough, the episode title is actually one of the endings in the game. It's when A2 is trying to help Pascal with saving Pascal's village when it's being attacked. And one of the endings that you could potentially get is A2 starts attacking some of the machines that are in the factory. This episode opens up with the same dialogue we hear from the game in Route B. Adam and Eve are discussing the need to wear clothes. If you look over, Adam is reading a book called Being and Nothingness, Volume 1. Apparently it's written by Jean-Paul Sartre, I believe is how you say his last name. And he is a philosophy and literature writer. Essentially, the book he is reading is the study of conscious of being, which can also explain Adam's personality a little bit and why he is the way that he is with reading books like this. He studies humans so much that he even dresses like them and tries to act like them. It's the little details like this that I can really appreciate the animators and even the writers to add such small details on like the titles of his books. Eve continues to ask Adam if they could play together. Adam tells Eve after he eats his fruit, which they also have a discussion about why they need to eat fruit. They can technically survive without the fruit, but it's another thing that Adam wants them to do because the humans did it. In the novel, long story short, Eve talks about how in reality they don't have to play with each other. As long as his brother is there and he looks like he's having fun, that's all that matters to Eve. Which is also why Eve is always suggesting they play human, because his big bro likes to play human. In Eve's mind, they think differently and like different things, but for Eve, him and big brother will always be together. And then, quote unquote, he says in his mind, "Isn't that awesome?" Now, the episode goes back to 9S and 2B. 9S is complaining about having to run errands for the Resistance. And this is when the anime takes a twist or different direction, or however you want to call it. In this episode, we see them walking across the bridge that ties to the mall in the Forest Kingdom. 2B is talking about how running errands is better than combat. There's always a chance of dying if they're in combat. 9S agrees, sort of. And then the conversation comes back to him wanting 2B to call him Nines. And, like usual, she denies it. If you've seen some of my other videos, then you'll probably guess already that more than likely she's tired of this conversation and she wants the conversation just to end. When they get to the mall, they are looking around and talking about the old world items they see. This is the same if you explore the mall in the game. You'll find a bunch of old world items lying around. 9S brings up that one day he wants to have a peaceful life and he wants to buy 2B a t-shirt. Earlier I spoke about how they took a different direction in this episode compared to the game, and that's because they find Pascal's village and they're holding up white flags, similar to the game. Lily sent them there and told them that they work with machines and explained their relationship with the machine village. Now this is a bit out of order because in the game you go to the village right after the amusement park. And in the game, that's when you go to speak to an enemy, and she confirms that, yeah, the village is peaceful and we work with them all the time. So I think this is an interesting choice to go out of order, but it does flow with the anime, so if it works, it works. In Pascal's home, you see a lot of books. Just like Adam, Pascal is a very curious machine. He likes to read philosophy, and you can even see there's Shakespeare there. Specifically, it looks like Merchant of Venice, which is an interesting choice for Pascal to have. This play is essentially a play about property, in telling the story of a merchant who treats his own flesh like property to secure a loan, and the moneylender who calls in the debt. The play asks the question about the value of life itself, which, when you think about that, Pascal and the machines are trying to understand the value of life. 9S has doubts about Pascal and doesn't trust him. In Pascal's village, you see some recognizable faces, though. You can see the merchant selling some parts like in the game. I could see some dented plates there. It looks like there's some coils and a bunch of other stuff that you could buy. You see the mom who's trying to get her son out of the little hut, and that's a quest from Route B That's one that 9S, you usually have to use him to hack the door to get the sun out, and you have to do this multiple times. You see also Jean-Paul, I could see the scientist machine, and then there's the big sister and little sister. Also, I noticed the layout of the village is different. Granted, in the village, it's basically one giant circle, and it made more sense to animate it like this and spread it out. It's definitely more practical than a giant circle. And now we get to the really fun Easter eggs from Nier Replicant. 2B and 9S come across this area with a tree that has, what do you know it? Emil's head. And if you don't know, Emil is one of the main characters that's in the original Nier or Nier Replicant game. What's interesting is it appears to be giving off a signal. And also, if you listen carefully to the background noise, you could hear it's Emil's song. It's called Emil's Sacrifice. But what's interesting is 9S detects a signal of some sort, which is interesting because Emil made a bunch of clones of himself in the game. So it's interesting that 9S can hack him. I guess he could have eventually made some robot versions of himself, but as far as I knew, he primarily still uses magic. When he does hack him, we see a bunch of his memories. You come across the City of Ruins, but that's currently in Nier Automata. So this may be 1,000 years or so after Replicant. We see the desert, which is confirmed to be Facade. This was also confirmed in Route C when A2 is doing a side mission for one of the Resistance members in the desert. Then we see the Shadow Lord's castle, and then you see the library as well. And specifically for this scene of the library, it takes place after that time skip that happens, which is, I think, 5 years later from the beginning of the game. And the obvious reason on why I know it's that is because of the giant hole in the library. That's from that boss fight that they had in the library. Then you see probably my favorite of the flashbacks is Kaine and Weiss in the library after Emil brings Kaine back, which I can understand why this moment was so important to him and why they chose this scene to be one of his flashbacks. Emil was so concerned about his looks and that Kaine wouldn't recognize him, and he was concerned that Kaine would be disgusted by his look. And it was such a sweet moment because she immediately recognized him and didn't judge him and accepted him, and even, of course, thanked him for saving her. Then you see Devila and Popola, but they hide their faces so 2B and 9S wouldn't recognize them. But those of us who know, we know, and we see you. This would have been when Devila and Popola told Kaine and Emil that they couldn't stay in the village. That's at least the only time I can think of that they were, both Devila and Popola were in the office, where Emil would have seen them both in the office. Now, granted, there was a 5-year time skip, so there could have been an opportunity during that time skip, but this is just the footage that I have. And then it shows Yona and Nier. It looks to be like they're in Yona's room. This is where you find her quite often because she is dealing with the Black Scrawl. So she isn't exactly the healthiest person. Now in Replicant, there isn't exactly a specific scene that this happens, but it's a nice little Easter egg to add. I personally think it'd be kind of cool if they did an anime of Nier Replicant as well, but I don't think they would, but it'd be nice. And I will admit, I wouldn't mind seeing Laura Bailey come back as Kaine, along with the rest of the crew obviously, but Kaine's my favorite. 9S then gets kicked out, but he was able to pull some interesting data from Emil. One of the images shows Emil from ending Y in the game. This ending, you're looking for Emil because there's something clearly wrong with him. Something is troubling him, and it turns out he cannot control the other clones. The clones are talking about how much pain they're in. Their sense of self-just is deteriorated. From the years of fighting and the years of war, it is a sad mission to do, and I definitely felt for Emil. He's lost everybody, but continued to keep fighting in this war. Emil eventually comes through, though, and reminds them all, even so, even if it's pointless, you still have to do it and keep fighting, and yells, "Isn't that right, Kaine?" Which was also another nice little Easter egg, and it definitely hit hard when he yelled that. And then he said that he had to keep going because this is the world his friends tried to save. And there's 2 routes to this ending. If you don't defeat him, you'll get a separate ending, and Emil will blow up the world, turning the planet into a dead chunk of rock. But if you stop him from blowing up, it's a sad yet beautiful moment because in the end, he gets to see all his friends again. Funny enough, this ending is referenced at the end of this episode with the puppets, explaining how in the game they could self-destruct, sort of. And in my gameplay, I did it as 9S because you get a trophy for this. And 9S loses his pants. It's such a weird thing, but whatever. And Emil wants to join in too, but instead he blows up the planet, just like in Ending Y. And then it shows the dialogue too, that he has turned the planet into a dead chunk of rock. Now, in a short story long, there's a story about Emil called Recollections of Emil. Now, in the game, you get to pick who you play as to do this mission at some point, because you unlock the chapter select, so on and so forth. For me, I've always enjoyed playing as A2. She is my favorite character, and I just enjoyed the gameplay more with her. But in a short story, it is 2B that is helping him. And as he fades, you hear a voice that isn't 2B. He saw a smiling person waving their hand, and a floating book as well. Emil can see him. He is so excited he can see him again. He thinks the lunar tears have actually granted his wish. The voice says, "Welcome back, Emil. Good work." Emil stands up and heads towards the person he yearned to see the most, all while repeating the name he loved. And the final picture is super cute because it's a picture of Nier, Yona, Weiss, and Kaine. I recommend everybody go give this a good read because you also get to learn more about Emil and the clones and even how he became that truck in the game. It's very interesting how he had to evolve over the centuries of fighting. Some other interesting images are 9S is looking at references to number 6, and then there's another reference to Emil and his sister. Now, a short version of this is him and his sister were experimented on. His sister was originally a weapon, and his abilities were to stop her if they lost control of her. Well, when he needed to save Kaine, Emil fused with his sister, and that is how he looks the way that he does now, is because of their fusion. In this episode, Pascal explains that Emil is an object of worship. Pascal found this location during a battle. Pascal hears Emil yell, "You have to live," which is the same dialogue you hear when he's calling to Kaine.
Stay alive! Stay alive!
Grandma.
Kaine, you gotta live! You gotta come back to us!
When Pascal heard that, something clicked, and Pascal all of a sudden felt the fear of dying. Now, 9S decides to be a little punk asshole, in my opinion, and he makes a comment that, "Oh, it must be a malfunction." Okay, you dick. Pascal talks about how they're separated from the network, but they're more connected than ever. 9S is looking beyond annoyed at this conversation and walks away. He at some point calls the machines selfish for thinking machines have the right to walk away, even though each side has killed in the thousands. He talks about how selfish Pascal is for bringing other machines with him because he didn't want to live alone. And then Pod talks about the probability of a machine surviving on their own. It's low. 2B states that androids can't live alone either, and that no one can. She has a bit more empathy than 9S does. It is also probably because she's just envious of their peace. I know she's tired of the conflict. Then all of a sudden something happens. It looks like 9S is being hacked. All of a sudden while he is looking at 2B, they're at the mall, and 2B has her weapon drawn. This may be another 2E reference. I'm not too sure where this one would take place. Because 2E has technically killed 9S so many times. At least they've made references as she's had to kill him so many times. You can find more of these in the short story long novel. He brushes it off like nothing had happened, and then he makes a joke about 2B needing 9S. Going back to their conversation they were just having. 2B brings up that once they're at peace, they'll have to buy t-shirts. They then come across machines fighting. 9S is witnessing what Pod explains is just normal conflict when you live together. 9S isn't surprised by the conflict because he thinks so little of the machines. But he gets ready to hack them and tries to stop them from fighting. 2B is yelling at him to stop, but then 210 interrupts them. 9S is showing more and more frustration looking at these machines. The episode then goes back to Adam and Eve, and they're reading Vice Amply Rewarded and Natural History. Now, I couldn't find much on these books, so if you know about them, let me know. I'm very curious on them. What's interesting is in the game at this point, Adam and Eve are preparing for 2B and 9S, discovering the aliens are dead and have been dead for centuries. It is interesting that they chose to skip this for the anime. I'm definitely curious on why. It seems like they're focusing a lot on the extra content that we didn't get in the games, but in more of the novels, which I'm partially okay with because the novels do give us a lot of insight, and I enjoy these stories. But thank you guys for watching. I'm also currently working on my next video, which is going to be a big one because I'll be going over the Pearl Harbor descent and that battle, comparing the anime and the manga, and then filling in some of those gaps that the anime just couldn't cover. So hope you guys enjoy this video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.